Hello and welcome to our weekly IG Live. You know, we spend a lot of time here talking to the authors and illustrators of diverse children's books, and today we are going to be talking to a librarian. And so, of course, she has a unique perspective that she's going to be sharing with us. Amy Nykamp is a librarian here in California. She's in Sonoma County, and she's also a voracious reader, especially of hidden histories. And Sonoma County chapter of the National Organization for Women, and a member of her local NAACP branch. And her goal is always to discover about what it means to be anti-racist and actively work towards breaking down structures of inequity. So, hi. So we're going to be
Hello.
talking about what role libraries have to play in that process, what it's like to build a diverse collection of books. But first, I just want to say hi to Amy. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This has to be the largest audience I've ever addressed. So even though I can't see them, I know they're out there, and that's exciting for me.
Yes, and what's nice is I love having the live interaction. So if people have questions or comments, you can see it as we're going. But then it's also saved for later. It'll be here on Instagram and on YouTube, so you can share it around to anybody and reach an even bigger audience. So, and we appreciate you being here. Like I said, we do this every week, and we talk about a lot of different topics, but one of the main ones we talk about is diverse books, especially diverse children's books. But can we take a step back first? And I want to talk about just being a librarian. I think, if I remember correctly, you're the first librarian we've interviewed on here that I know of. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you love being a librarian so much, and what exactly it is that you do? I think people maybe don't have a really good idea of what the modern librarian does.
Well, we don't sit around shushing people. I became a librarian about 4 years ago, and after 30 years in a tech company where I was learning to work with a lot of people from all backgrounds, all ages, and all interests and skill levels. And that's what I'm finding in the library, and that's what attracted me so much to being a librarian, is that I can, in my day-to-day job, I can do everything from showing our newest and youngest patrons how to use their library card, to training someone on how to log into our computers or how to use their device to get ebooks onto it, to not only finding material for people to read, but for helping them get research material. And it's very exciting to me. Every patron that walks in, I don't know what their story is. I don't know what their needs are. And so as a librarian, it's very important for me to be a good listener and to find out exactly what they're needing so that we can communicate and provide the right information.
One of the things I love about libraries is it's such a non-judgmental space. And like you said, you have so many diverse people with diverse needs. You never know what they're going to be asking for. And I don't think a lot of people realize that librarians are actually pretty radical and have a history of really advocating for access to information, and especially today, that's something that you wouldn't think would be controversial, but it actually is today. But can you talk a little bit about libraries and their role in anti-racism, building a more equitable society? What role do you think the libraries can play in that?
Oh, that's powerful. That's an excellent question, because libraries are challenged by so many things, and equity has to be at the forefront. Being an anti-racist librarian is much harder than you think, because we've all got our own biases, and we can't really understand each other unless we allow the other person to share their story, and so that we can share ours. It's important to acknowledge what voices aren't being heard by the collection. In other words, all the materials that we have, both in print and online, what services we offer, to whom do we offer them, who isn't being served. And I recently read something about, we're not always ADA compliant. Not every library is ADA compliant. Or because we're not mandating masks anymore, there are people who are autoimmune suppressed who can't visit the library, don't feel safe because not everybody is wearing a mask. And we're not necessarily being able to tailor all of our activities to everyone. So that's something to always work on. With regard to anti-racism, we are trying very hard to make sure that our materials reflect that. We are trying to make sure that we have a good, solid percentage of our material that comes from or is about Native Americans, about all people of color in whatever their aspects may be, certainly of the LGBTQ plus community, and of people with various, who are neurodiverse or who have physical disabilities in some way. We try and make sure in some of our branches we have a small collection of Braille, although that tends to be special libraries that have that as opposed to our public library system. I went to Hawaii last summer and was introduced to the Braille library there on the Big Island, which I thought was pretty neat, but that's rarer than you think. And so it's very hard to cover everything, but we do try and make sure we're aware of what's going on. We also have to consider our own staff and how our hiring procedures are. Who are we missing? Who are we overlooking or ignoring in our hiring practices? And we are forming or have formed a racial equity team for diversity, inclusion, and equity. And they've been working very hard for the last year or two. We're also trying to hire a consultant specifically for that. So libraries have to really work in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because I think most of us would tend to think just about the collection and not even necessarily all of the groups that you mentioned. We tend to think of racial diversity and so on, but you've really kind of expanded the idea of what diversity is, but also that it's not just the collection, it's also, are the facilities accessible and are the activities accessible, and even like the issue of masks that maybe people may not think about very much. And as you go about, like you talked about with the collection, that you try to make sure that you are including diverse voices. How do you stay on top of what the new books are and all of that? Because there are just, I do a lot of book reviews, and just the volume of books that are being published. And then there's some, there are the big publishers, but there are a lot of small publishers, self-publishing. How do you stay on top of what's out there?
Well, the biggest way is it takes a team. So we have a collections department that's broken up into adult services, children's services, and youth services, so for teenagers. And the collection department is constantly looking out for new books. At the same time, individual librarians need to be reading their own reviews from like the ALA magazines or from Hornbook or from, trying to remember other magazines that are specifically for library reviews, and keeping up, doing a lot of reading. For the last several months, I've been working in the children's services section of one of the branches. And I went through what we call weeding, which is removing books that aren't circulating or removing books that are outdated in their language or their tone, their bias. I recently removed a bunch of biographies of George Washington because they gloss over the fact that he owned slaves. In fact, one of them that was written for younger children says he was a rich farmer. So that was going away. But now I have to find, books that will fill that hole of not having enough. You know, you want to not erase history, but you do want to augment what's being said, and that's the trick. So you do have to work with all sorts of people by going to conferences and by attending online meetings and things. So there's a lot of ways, but it does take a village.
I can imagine that was, I mean, but it's also really great as a community member to hear what care you all take in this and how much effort goes into it. I'm not sure that we all appreciate that when we walk into the library, how much thought goes into the collection, or even just thinking about the process of weeding, of going through and removing ones that are outdated. And let me see. So when you're in that kind of process, what kind of gaps have you seen? Are there books that you would like you mentioned the example of George Washington, that you'd like to find, you have to find more biographies for kids that are not biased. Are there other areas that you'd like to fill, that it's hard to find books or resources that you're looking for, or ones that people are asking for a lot that maybe is not in the collection right now?
I haven't run into too much of that. We do have a system by which community members and staff can request for us to purchase a book. That doesn't mean that we'll be able to, because we can't fulfill all requests, of course, due to space and budget. But we do consider every request very seriously, because we want to engage the community in you know, to make the community feel like the library is for them. And it is tricky, but that's the way you have to, that's why you have to share each other's stories and be willing to listen. We have a huge homeless population in Sonoma County, and many of the branches have more shelterless people coming into the library than other branches, and you also have to accommodate their needs at the same time, knowing what their behavior, you know, what behavior is acceptable to staying in and what behavior is not. And you hate to throw somebody out. Sometimes we do have to ban patrons for a certain period of time, but on the whole, I think the patrons understand that this is a public library to be shared by all.
Right. I hadn't thought about that as far as what the challenges would be with, you know, the behavior of people coming in, but also how do you balance having it accepting to all people, but still making a safe space for everybody. And speaking of safe spaces, one of the issues I know that is going on right now is about book bans. We've talked about that a lot on the show. What has your experience been with those, or what have you heard from other colleagues of yours as far as threats of book bans or protests around certain books that you put on the shelf?
So we've had several incidences, and not just a book banning, but there have been a couple of really bad incidences where Black Lives Matter banners that have been hung have been torn down and burned. They were outside the library, not inside. We've had pride flags. We try and make sure that the pride symbol is prominently displayed at most of our branches, if not all. We had in one case a patron check out all of the LGBTQ plus books that were on display for Pride Month. And eventually they brought them back, but we were concerned that we would never see them again. The other week, I had a children's book returned with 3 notes taped to it. It was a book on the Hindu god Ganesh, I believe, who's the elephant prince. And this child identified herself and her age, which was quite young, and she was saying, "This is a false god, thou shalt not have other gods before me." So I'm finding that, which was really totally surprising to me and sad, that at least the book wasn't destroyed. You know, that can
Right.
happen. We know that some of the highly challenged books in other states are being challenged here, just not to the same degree. We're very lucky in California, at least in Northern California, to have a pretty good reflection of what society needs to be able to get along with each other. But
And so what,
it does strike.
and what can we do as community members to support, I mean, in general, to support the library, but especially, you know, when there are incidents that are happening in our community, what are things that we can do?
I would say make your wishes known. Come to the commission meetings, for instance, or write letters to the commissioners of the library, to the branches. Send in comments online to our Facebook and Instagram pages. Let your wishes be known. If you go onto our website, as I said, there's a purchase request. And let us know that there are books that need to be ordered. So that's another way. We do as much as we can to reach out to the community. In fact, one of the things that our system offers are Wi-Fi hotspots and Chrome kits that contain Chromebooks and Wi-Fi hotspots. And we have hundreds of them in the system, and they are always in high demand, but people need internet, right? So we're always adding to them. So as a community member, visit your local library and vote for when bills come up saying, you know, I know it might raise your property taxes a bit, but please do support your local libraries. And if you are talking about school libraries, you can be even more proactive in that, and don't let school librarians be let go or libraries be closed.
Right. That's something really important to remember, because you all can advocate, but since the libraries are supposed to support the community, when the community speaks out and gives their support, I know that really makes a difference. And you mentioned going to the meetings. I think a lot of us don't really think about doing that, commission meetings or school board meetings, that's something we can do. And I can say from personal experience, ordering books from requesting books from the library is really easy. I'm in Sacramento County, and they make it super easy. Sometimes they have ordered the books themselves, or ours has one where I can go through them and order it from Amazon, have it delivered to my house, and then I return it to the library, and it's part of the collection. So there are all kinds of things that, like you talked about, like the Wi-Fi hotspots and the Chromebooks. I mean, there's so many resources at the library that I think we aren't even aware of, and how much support that it gives to the community as a whole. So yes, it's very important for us to support our librarians and the libraries, especially now as they are coming under fire. And so thank you for taking the time to join us and work out all the technical parts that we had to figure out earlier today. And so time for that. Did you have any final thoughts that you'd like to add?
I just want to say thank you again for allowing me the platform to speak about how great libraries can be. And I hope this helps. I hope this helps the community who's watching know what services can be offered and what still need to be offered.
Right. Thank you. And if you just joined us here at the end, this will be up on Instagram in a few minutes. You can watch the full video, and I will also have it up on YouTube tonight. So thank you. And thanks again to Amy for joining us. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.